In the Oxford Dictionary, revenge is described as the action of hurting or harming someone in return for an injury or wrong suffered at their hands. Revenge is a sort of ever-lingering part of the human experience. There is a sense of catharsis associated with enacting or seeing someone enact revenge. Revenge, though, is typically seen as a more masculine activity. Killing, or revenge that leads to killing, is seen as morally impure in general, but especially when the killer is female, because femininity and by extension women are associated with purity and passivity. The active and perceived immorality of revenge clashes with these traits and taints that purity. Despite this, in many folklore from around the world, women are used as symbols of revenge and vengeance. The concept of the vengeful spirit is present in folklore from all around the world. Many of these spirits are women who were wronged in their lives or just ones who were vengeful for the hell of it. In Mexican folklore, one such popular figure is La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman. In life, she was a beautiful woman named Maria. She had plenty of suitors, all of which she refused. That was until a handsome young man caught her eye. They got married and had 2 children. Their happiness, however, was short-lived, as soon after he came to her to pledge his life to another woman, claiming that she was no longer beautiful. Distraught, she had wanted to make him feel the same anger and pain she felt, so she drowned her children. After the anger subsided and she realized what she had done, she screamed out and went searching for her children. She eventually drowned. She spends eternity searching for them and at every river or lake, dragging down anyone foolish enough to get close to her. Her story is often used to scare children into behaving themselves with the threat of her coming to take them if they don't. In Japan, the onryo, which translates to the vengeful spirit, is a staple within their ghost stories. These spirits are almost exclusively women who were wronged in their life and came back to take vengeance. In the article Purgatory of Revenge and Cosmic Rage by Donna Sullivan, he states, onryo are driven by the desire to get even for some perceived wrong, going so far as to cause natural disasters to get their way. This desire for revenge and consignment to a kind of purgatory distinguishes the onryo in the canon of Japanese ghost lore. Onryo stories are supernatural, but they often deal with real royal machinations, corrosive jealousy, and crimes of passion, culminating in a cosmic rage that transcends life and death. Unquote. What is similar with how the vengeful spirits are conceptualized across cultures is not only that they were wronged in life or that they had particularly violent deaths, but how they seem to gain agency in death. It is through dying that they are able to inflict pain on those who wrong them. Death becomes a stage for the metamorphosis into the monster, as they are typically depicted as monstrous or unsightly. Unlike how many female revengers are depicted in film and TV, the women in folklore and mythology are not merely conduits for vengeance. In many ways, they are vengeance, and it is their monstrosity that allows them to do so. There is something almost fantastical about revenge films. Most revenge films are a sort of a spectacle. They're less a reflection of what happens in the real world and more of a wishful image of what we hope would happen to those who wrong us. Female revenge films seem to be doubly fantastical, as most of them center women who have been directly or indirectly wronged by men, and these women getting their vengeance. What feels fantastical, though, is the idea of them actually getting justice. It also feels oddly empowering. In a society where women rarely get justice for the abuse they face, it is cathartic seeing predators face actual consequences. Maybe this is why the rape revenge genre is seen by some as feminist in nature. But there are problems with these stories. In an article for The Swaddle by Pooja Dasarkar, she states,
the avenging woman is a complex trope. Women seeking revenge go through a gamut of emotions, from fear to the instinct to fight, to the resulting guilt or remorse and maybe even forgiveness. But our cinema rarely keeps up with this layered set of emotions. It simply imitates the toxic forms of glorified male violence we are so used to watching and applauding in films like Reservoir Dogs, Taken, Gangs of Wasseypur, Goodfellas, or The Godfather. And by mirroring the male tropes of violence, women's actions are reduced to being reactive, rather than fleshed out responses that reflect nuance and actual feelings.
This is a common critique I've seen, especially in the rape revenge subgenre from critics and viewers alike. They notice that there is a sort of one-dimensionality given to the protagonists. We barely get to know anything about them. They become less of a person and more of a vessel for vengeance. Another critique of the female revenge narrative is the sacrifice of oneself to enact revenge. In the article, The Popular Pleasures of Female Revenge, or Rage Bursting in a Blaze of Gunfire by Kirsten Mathlenz, it states,
spectacular action narratives construct a position for women which capitalizes upon their real, material experiences of a tenuous relationship to danger. With heroes like Rambo, the pleasure of pain exists because the audience narratively understands that payback is near and that this painful interlude is a temporary form of victimization/masochism. However, for the heroine, this is not always the case. In fact, as I've already shown, the dynamic reverses so as to create the sense that it is her agency/freedom which is only temporary, and that she will soon return to her normally victimized, compromised position.
Many people, including myself, are very critical of Emerald Fennell's debut film, Promising Young Woman, because of its ending. In an article for EU, she stated, "I had to be honest. It's how the system works. The house always wins. For me, it would be an enormous injustice to be so honest the whole way through this movie, and then have a Hollywood ending that also let us all off the hook." End quote. A huge part of the reason why the rape revenge genre works is because it's not wholly rooted in reality. When you try to make it reflect how our actual society works, it loses a lot of that cathartic element that's embedded in the revenge fantasy. In the end, Cassie pays the ultimate price for seeking vengeance. She served as a conduit for justice, which was ultimately enacted by the state. I understand a lot of people's frustration, especially when you go in expecting a very particular type of film with certain tropes and conventions. While I wasn't a fan of the element of realism Fennell wanted to insert in the film, I understand what she was aiming for. The concept of a woman having to die in order to get justice is not new. We literally spoke earlier about how death is linked to metamorphosis in folklore and mythology. But in many of these films, it is death without the metamorphosis, whether that be literal or metaphorical. But that metamorphosis is necessary for the catharsis that we're expecting within these narratives. Basically, what we want to see is a more fringe type of justice. And in a sense, Fennell did deliver that, even if it's not who we wanted to see enacted. Cassandra, through her text messages, acts as a kind of vengeful spirit, taunting those who wronged her from the grave, which is kind of cool, except for the fact that I don't think she should have been in a grave to begin with. Instead of giving us the catharsis that we're looking for, Fennell gives us something similar. Shock value. Shock value can be mistaken for catharsis, but it's not, and it does not hold up the same. Shock value tries to provoke a reaction, while catharsis allows us to release those strong emotions that we have. It is the element of catharsis that makes revenge films so endearing. It doesn't need to be bloody or violent, but it needs to be there to feel fulfilling. It's about equilibrium, and two women dying to get these two men accountable doesn't satisfy that equilibrium, in my opinion. A TV show that I think does implement realism well into its narrative is I May Destroy You. In the finale, Arabella goes through a string of revenge fantasies. The episode ultimately ends in a reality where none of these fantasies have actually been enacted. With time, she finds some peace within herself and continues living life. We really go through the full gamut of emotions Arabella is experiencing and see her choose how to move forward with her life. In an article for BFI titled A Survivor's Take on I May Destroy You by Winnie M. Lee states, quote, "I May Destroy You is a boon to rape survivors, enabling us to tell the rest of the world, this is how it really is. The aftermath of rape is frustrating, messy, soul-destroying, unfair, and often very unresolved. It is this lack of resolution which Cowell plays with so cleverly, toying with our narrative expectations as viewers, while also delivering a satisfying but realistic finale." End quote. While anger is gendered, it's also heavily racialized, with women of color, specifically black women, not being allowed to express any semblance of rage without being ridiculed or seen as lacking some sort of emotional stability. In a 1981 article titled The Uses of Anger, Women Responding to Racism by Audre Lorde, she states, Quote, "My anger is a response to racist attitudes and to actions and presumptions that arise out of those attitudes. If your dealings with other women reflect those attitudes, then my anger and your attendant fears are spotlights that can be used for growth in the same way I have used learning to express anger for my growth. But for corrective surgery, not guilt. Guilt and defensiveness are bricks in a wall which we all plunder. They serve none of our futures. For women raised to fear, too often anger threatens annihilation. In the male construct of brute force, we were taught that our lives depended upon the goodwill of patriarchal power. The anger of others was to be avoided at all costs, because there was nothing to be learned from it but pain, a judgment that we had been bad girls, come up lacking, not done what we were supposed to do. And if we accept our powerlessness, then of course any anger can destroy us." End quote. Revenge doesn't always have to be bloody. Traditionally, women and people who did not have access to power used covert and indirect methods to enact revenge, such as poisonings, curses, prayers, gossiping to damage someone's reputation, and lamentation to incite others to take revenge on their behalf. These were all efforts to re-equilibrate power. The film Mean Girls highlights how these covert methods are used. When Janice sees that Regina's influence is too strong for her to overtly go against, she uses Katie to infiltrate Regina's clique, the Plastics, and take them down from the inside. Katie gets enthralled by Regina's equal status and essentially becomes another version of her after successfully dethroning her. Regina uses gossiping via the burn book as a weapon to re-equilibrate power once more, as she releases everyone's secret and pins the blame on Katie. Katie frequently addresses the covert nature when she juxtaposes the animal world with girl world, stating that in the animal world she could just fight it out with whoever she had issues with, but not in girl world. In girl world, she has to be more tactical. Problems can't be solved with brute force. Instead, they are solved by plotting and scheming. Women have a complicated relationship with anger. It's probably the one emotion we're taught to repress. This leads to passive aggression and an inability to express how we truly feel. Writer and activist Soraya Chamali discusses this idea in an interview for the Institute of Gender and Economy. She speaks about how anger is gendered and how men and women are perceived differently, even when displaying the same set of behaviors.
We divide this powerful emotion up in very gendered ways in many ways, but one of the most powerful is to attribute sadness to girls and women and anger and aggression to boys and men for displaying the same behavior. So adults looking at infants in a crib, if they think that the infant is a boy and the child is agitated and tetchy, they'll use language that indicates negative emotions tied to anger and aggression. But if they think the same child is a girl, they'll describe that girl in terms of her being sad and needy. And so that repeats itself. Even in adults looking at children's drawings, if they think the drawing is a boy's, they use this very male-associated anger bias language. But if they think the same drawing is by a girl, it shifts to sadness. And in fact, sadness and anger are really different. One is a retreat emotion, and one is not a retreat emotion. And so when you keep attributing the retreat emotion to girls and women, it cultivates that sense of powerlessness, that you should keep it to yourself. And there are many virtues, actually, to being sad. People who are sad tend to be more generous. They tend to be more thoughtful in many ways. But people who are angry believe that they can make change and that they have the right to do that. So there's a difference.
Often in revenge narratives, there is a hollowness in the main character that can only be filled by the catharsis of revenge, whether that leaves them fulfilled or realizing that it was an empty chase all along. There is an extremely blurry line between punishment and revenge. In Greek mythology, the Erinyes, or the Furies, are the goddesses of revenge and retribution, punishing those who defy the natural order. They blur the line between justice and vengeance. Over time, the role of the Furies changed. They went from enacting punishment and vengeance to becoming the Eumenides, or the kindly ones, who only punish people who are truly deserving. The article The Cost, Benefits, and Paradox of Revenge describes the differences as such. Quote, "Despite definitional similarities, philosophers argue that revenge and punishment can be distinguished by their respective goals. Whereas revenge is motivated by a yearning to see a transgressor suffer, punishment is motivated by a desire to improve a transgressor's future behavior. Unlike revenge, punishment need not be preceded by anger. We emphasize the intention to see the transgressor suffer in our conceptualization of revenge, end quote. So is revenge morally bad? And do we care? Obviously, in the real world, it's not advised to go slashing people up with a katana, but for the sake of film and TV and the art in general, we can use our conceptualizations of revenge to soothe, vent our frustrations, and exercise that petty part of our brains that really want to start some shit. And in the case of female revenge narratives, it can be extremely cathartic to see, even if it is only a fantasy.